Hey, Pretty Girl Club. So today I want to talk about the documentary Light Girls. You guys know that lately I've been talking about skin tone identity, how my skin tone identity was formed, and some of you guys have been commenting about that documentary. And also, this video is inspired by Exotical Dollhouse, so be sure to go subscribe to her. She recently did a live stream about how Oprah and Iyanla Van Zant, they tried to do a colorism conversation, and I noticed that this same thing happened that I'm going to be talking about today. So, have you ever noticed that a lot of darker skinned, unambiguous mono black women, they will fight to discuss colorism and they'll say, hey, we want to talk about this. This is very important. We should bring light to this. We should talk about skin tone and stuff. But then, as soon as someone who is non dark skinned wants to join the conversation, then suddenly that's not okay. And by the way, for those of you who want to say, oh, well, colorism should be talked about only by dark skinned black women. Okay, so then stop calling it a conversation, because the definition of the word conversation means that there are two people talking, there are two people listening, and there are people going back and forth. But I've noticed this rhetoric in the black community where a lot of unambiguous mono dark skinned black women, they don't want to go back and forth. They just wanted you to sit there and listen to them. Very similar to how ever since this sector of YouTube started growing, then suddenly Chrissy decided she's no longer going to talk about colorism, which she really isn't, because she's too scared to speak against this community at this point. But I've noticed that whenever dark skinned black women speak about colorism, nobody qualifies them. Nobody says you have to be this shade in order to speak about it. No, people just listen and they don't judge one person's skin tone compared to another. But as soon as it's time for the light skins to speak, oh no, we need to take out the paper bag test. We need to discuss your skin tone. We need to pull up pictures of you in the winter, spring, summer, and fall. Oh no, this other person over here, she's too dark. Why is she talking about skin tone? Oh, Tatyana Ali, she's too dark. Why is she in the Light Girls documentary? And I've noticed that this is a deflection tactic. The black community begged to talk about colorism. Well, it was mainly black women, honestly. They begged to talk about colorism, but then when we finally discuss it and there are people who you perceive as being more privileged, then suddenly they need to sit down and shut up and they're not even a part of the light-skinned community. And it's like, why are you gatekeeping light skin so hard, but nobody gives a fuck about who's dark skinned? Has anybody noticed that? Nobody gives a fuck about who's dark skinned. Nobody cares how dark you are. But then as soon as a light skinned person comes on, oh, well, you're not even light. You're light brown. Oh, well, actually, you're a little bit cinnamon. Oh, no, you look a little bit caramel. So, no, you can't talk about this. And I've noticed that in the black community, they're trying very hard to erase the light skinned identity, because the agenda is they want to pretend like no light skinned people exist, and they want to try to uphold the paper bag test because they know that a lot of people who have a high yellow skin tone tend to be mixed race for the most part. I know that people base it on stereotypes, but what they're trying to do is they're trying to say that, oh no, the only people who are light skinned are actually mixed race people. And so you guys aren't even a part of the black community anyway. And so, nope, dark skinned, black, unambiguous people get to dominate the conversation. That's really what this agenda is about. And another thing about Tatyana Ali being in Light Girls, a lot of people won't admit that texturism and featureism plays a huge role in how your skin tone is perceived. So the reason Tatyana Ali was put in Light Girls was due to, number one, her being mixed race, and number two, obviously the obsession with her hair texture. We all know that in the dark skin unambiguous community, they are very obsessed with hair texture. I would even argue that there's an obsession with hair texture and facial features on the same level as skin tone, because a lot of people, they can't even determine what skin tone is what unless they see the person's facial features or hair texture. And so that's why anytime I want to shut someone up when they start talking about skin tones, all I have to do is ask them, what color is light skinned? Don't name a celebrity, don't name a person, because I don't want you to try to name somebody that has certain features. No, no, no. What color is light skinned? Orange, yellow, butter pecan, caramel, what color? And watch them go silent, because they don't actually have a color standard in their mind. They have a phenotype standard for what they considered light skin. And that's why Tatyana Ali was in Light Girls. I don't know who the casting director was or who the person was that created Light Girls, but I've noticed that a lot of people in the black community, they actually conflate mixed race, they conflate light skin, they conflate certain hair textures. So they will mix us all up with one another, and they will use the wrong nicknames and the wrong descriptors because they associate lighter skin tones with having a certain hair texture and certain facial features. And same thing, they associate darker skin tones with having broader features and kinkier hair. You know that I don't support that on this channel, so that's why I'd like to call out that hypocrisy all the time. But I've noticed that this whole argument about who's light skinned and who's not, and who's privileged and who's not, it doesn't come up until the colorism conversation comes up. And I've noticed that one of the main reasons people were so mad at Light Girls was because in the Light Girls documentary, all of the girls in that documentary, they all talked about experiencing either jealousy or being fetishized or things like sexual assault. Whereas in Dark Girls, they talked more about how men in school would make fun of them. So they talked more about how black men would call them ugly, basically. And I'm not shaming it or being mean towards it, but I just feel like a lot of people actually are jealous of the perceived privilege that they believe that people have based on hair texture. And so that's with the Tatyana Ali thing. Again, what people were trying to say is you're not light skinned enough to be in this exclusive Light Girls documentary. I put the Light Girls documentary on a higher pedestal than the Dark Girls documentary. And so I feel like I need to police and gatekeep who gets to be on the Light Girls documentary. And it's like, once again, this is another deflection. So instead of actually listening to what the documentary was about, instead of actually listening to Tatyana Ali talk about texturism, which is actually what she talked about, you decide to ignore all of that and just focus on, oh, who's the lightest of the light skins, who's the darkest of the dark skins. Let me get this girl to feel like she is othered. Let me get Tatyana Ali to feel like she doesn't measure up by pointing out the fact that she's not light skinned. And it's like, the documentary was not supposed to be some sort of argument or some sort of standardized test. Have you ever noticed that they have like a standardized test for who's supposed to be light skinned and who's not? And it's like the whole point of the documentaries was to discuss multiple things, such as colorism, texturism, and featureism. If I'm not mistaken, usually when the colorism conversation comes up, the texturism and featureism conversation have to come up as well, because texturism and featureism determines how your skin tone is perceived in a lot of cases. And so one thing I've noticed with darker skin mixed women is if you're of a darker skin tone, and let's say you have very keen features and you have a loose hair texture, kind of like Tatyana Ali, people will refuse to put you in the dark skin category because what they're really implying is you don't meet the stereotypes of a dark skinned black woman and you don't have the experience of a dark skinned black woman. So I'm going to put you in a subcategory called brown skinned, or I'm going to call you by a different name, such as cinnamon, hazelnut. You know, they may call you by a different skin tone nickname, is something that I've noticed. But has anyone else noticed how whenever a person from the black community wants to humble you, they will always try to humble you by comparing you to someone lighter than you, or someone who has looser hair textures, or somebody who has thinner features, or they'll try to compare you to somebody who has more non-black in their bloodline. They have more whiteness in their bloodline. I've noticed that this actually happens over here on this sector of YouTube as well. People will try to tell the darker skinned women over here, oh, well, you're not even light skinned. So like Exoticals United, she won't accept you because you're dark skinned. She looks down on you because of your skin tone. And then they'll tell me, oh, well, you're not at least 50% white. You're not a 50-50 black-white biracial because of your other admixture. You don't actually count. You're not a valid biracial person. And so the biracials won't accept you. And then they'll try to break it up into these hierarchies. Oh, well, you're a biracial person, but you're ugly, or you're not white passing. So this other biracial person is prettier than you. So do you see how they constantly bring this hierarchy mindset into every conversation when nobody is talking about hierarchies? Tatyana Ali didn't go on to Light Girls and say, oh my God, I'm light skinned. She didn't even say that. She was talking about texturism. And even when it comes to skin tone, have you ever noticed how people get mad if you think you're light skinned, but they don't get mad if you think you're dark skinned? Isn't that interesting? People only get pissed off if you think you're light skinned. Nobody gives a fuck if you think you're chocolate. Nobody cares if you think you're mocha, or they don't get mad. They might be like, oh, well, you're not quite that dark, but whatever. But when it comes to thinking you're light skinned, or if you call yourself by a nickname that is associated with light skin tones like butter pecan, caramel, whatever, then suddenly people want to have a whole argument. They want to start diminishing you. And even if you go on to Exotical Dollhouse's live stream where she showed the light skinned girl where they were talking about colorism, people were in the comment section of that video trying to police that girl and say, you don't count as light skin. So notice how they don't talk about the actual bullying that a person can face due to their skin tone. They don't talk about the jealousy and the crazy humbling tactics, the anti-black humbling tactics that are often used against light-skinned people. But instead, they would rather argue about a skin tone. So this is all just a deflection tactic. And also, when it comes to the Light Girls documentary and the Dark Girls documentary, I don't think that they named it Light Girls and Dark Girls so that they can only talk about who's light skin and who's dark skin. I think that they just named it Light Girls and Dark Girls so that they can tell you, hey, these are the experiences of somebody who identifies as a lighter skinned person, or, these are the common experiences between women who have a phenotype that is similar to this. So notice how even in Dark Girls, they talked about dating. I didn't see people policing the women in Dark Girls saying, oh, well, you're fat, so that's probably why he didn't like you. Or, oh, he was making fun of you for some other reason. You're just blaming it on colorism. No, I didn't see people going out of their way to invalidate the women in Dark Girls. But I've noticed that there's always a tendency to invalidate lighter skinned women, to invalidate women with looser hair textures, or to invalidate women who benefit from featureism. Anytime a person sees you as being more privileged than them, they're not going to have any empathy for you. And in fact, they're going to try to humble you and make you lower on the scale because they have hierarchy mindsets. So they're going to try to make you lower on their internalized scale so that they can approximate themselves to you. So it's like, how are you going to try to put someone down and then turn around and approximate yourselves to them? That just shows what you think of yourself. That just shows what you think of blackness. Oh, well, you're too dark. You wouldn't be pedestalized. Okay, so you're admitting that you think black women are too dark to be pedestalized. That's your internalized anti-blackness coming out. And what's even funnier is when people say, oh, it doesn't really matter, but Tatyana Ali is not light skinned, or it doesn't really matter, but so and so person is light brown and they're not high yellow. And it's like, okay, well, if it doesn't matter, why are you commenting on it? The reason that it matters to me personally is because I am creating a YouTube channel to discuss the experiences of women like myself. So if it doesn't matter to you, then that's fine. Then just go to another YouTube channel, go watch another documentary. That's another thing. People love telling us, stay out of unambiguous dark-skinned black women's spaces. Stop replacing black women. Okay, so they had a whole documentary for Dark Girls. So why are you watching the Light Girls documentary? You shouldn't even know who's in it, right? Because we are staying out of each other's spaces, or we're not commenting on other people's experiences that we don't have. So it's like, if Tatyana Ali's experience was more aligned with the women in the Light Girls documentary, which it obviously was, then why are you mad? The Light Girls documentary wasn't saying light girls means everybody in the documentary is light skinned. I think that the Light Girls documentary was just like how Dark Girls was, where it was showing people on the darker end of the spectrum or people who were unambiguous. That's really the correct phrasing. But back then they didn't have that phrasing. So they should have called it unambiguous girls, and then they could have called it like ambiguous girls or something for the other documentary. But I've noticed that usually people will try to put you on a hierarchy. They'll try to lower you on their internalized hierarchy, or they will try to brag about how their cousin is just as light as you, their mom is just as light as you, their dad is as light as you, their grandpa, their great-great-grandparent is mixed race, and then they will use that to approximate themselves to you. That's no different than red pill men saying, you think you're a 10, you're actually a 6. You're average at best, just like me. You're in the same part of the dating pool as me. And so anytime people try to go out of their way to say you're not who you really are, or they try to invalidate your experience, what they're really saying is you're not more privileged than me. You're down here at the bottom, just like I am. You're down here in the underprivileged category, just like me. Who do you think you are? And this is why people get mad when a girl thinks she's light skinned, or when she thinks that she's lighter than she is, which, by the way, Tatyana Ali never even said in that documentary, oh my God, I'm light skinned and this is my experience. She never even said that. You're not even allowed to use the term light skin in real life anymore. You're not allowed to call yourself light skinned because that's colorist. Only the black community gets to determine if you're light skinned or not. Only other people get to determine if you're light skinned or not. Have you ever noticed that? Other people who are insecure about themselves, they want to be able to control your self perception. And so if you say terms like, oh, I'm exotic, or I'm mixed race, or I'm biracial, or I'm light skinned, or whatever, I have a looser hair texture. Other people who are triggered by that, they want to be able to tell you, oh, no, you're not. You don't have a loose hair texture, you have a tight hair texture. And it's like, why do you care about that person's self perception? Or they'll be like, well, you're not light, you're actually light brown. And it's like, first of all, if dark brown skin is dark skinned, how is light brown skin not light skinned? That doesn't even make logical sense. The only people who want to control your self perception are people who are insecure about theirs. Because seriously, I don't care how confident another girl is. I don't care what another girl calls herself. I don't care what another girl's hair texture is or what nickname she gives herself. I don't care if she calls herself thick. I have friends who call themselves thick and they're very skinny. They're very petite. But I don't get mad and say, "You're not thick. You're super skinny. You have no ass." No, the only people that would say that are people that are literally hating on that person's identity. That's literally what it is. You are hating on that person's identity. You are mad that that person identifies themselves in a way that defies your stereotype. That's what it is. That's why people police skin tones, hair textures. That's why they do stuff like that. It's because, number one, they really want to deflect from the talking points. They don't want to talk about the jealousy that a lot of unambiguous women have towards lighter skinned people. They don't want to talk about being jealous. They'll never admit that they've ever been jealous. Have you ever noticed that? Has anyone ever noticed that? The most insecure people, the most angry people, they have never admitted that they've ever been jealous of anybody else. Am I the only one that's noticed that? No, they don't want to admit that they've ever been jealous because that's impossible. It's impossible for a dark-skinned black woman to be colorist. Dark-skinned black men can be colorist, white people can be colorist, everybody else can be colorist except for unambiguous dark-skinned black women. And also, invalidating Tatyana Ali's experience because she's not light skinned, you're actually being colorist right there because you're saying your skin tone disqualifies you. You're too dark to be talking about your experience in a documentary called Light Girls. And it's like, first of all, why are people taking these documentary titles so seriously? I will admit, I don't necessarily think that they had the best titles for the documentaries because, for example, even with dark girls, there are dark girls who are from India, there are dark girls who are from all different kinds of countries, but I don't think that the producers thought that people would be so triggered and so riled up over that. And the black community is hypocritical because they will argue up and down and they'll say, well, brown skin exists, that category exists, brown skin, brown skin, brown skin. Okay, so then why are you mad when they finally put a quote unquote brown skin girl and had her talk about her experience? Oh, you're mad because she happened to be a brown skinned girl who had a loose hair texture and who was mixed. That's why you're mad. You wouldn't have been mad if she was quote unquote brown skin and then she had 4C hair and broad features and was monoracial and was in dark girls. You're just mad because you're seeing a quote unquote brown skin girl having a similar experience to light skinned girls, which you thought was impossible. So once again, it all goes back to they're literally just mad because you defied their stereotypes. What do you ladies think? Let me know in the comment section and I'll talk to you next time. Stay pretty, ladies.